Welcome to the Voice of Hope, where bold leaders and healers share how they're building hope, not just talking about it. I'm Dr. Ken Huey. Let's meet the changemakers transforming lives from the therapy room to the boardroom. Today's guest is Dr. Rhea Fernandes, a clinical psychologist and chief operating officer at Devereux Advanced Behavioral Health, one of the nation's leading nonprofit mental health organizations. With a deep foundation in psychotherapy and over 2 decades of progressive leadership, Rhea brings a rare blend of clinical insight and operational strategy to large-scale behavioral health systems. At Devereux, she leads transformative programs that prioritize quality care, outcomes monitoring, and inclusive success and access, creating lasting impact for individuals and families navigating complex mental health challenges. Rhea, thanks so much for being with us. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Ken.
Yeah.
I've been looking forward to being here.
Well, great. So I'd like to start with really what brings you to this field. There's a guy named Simon Sinek that you may have heard of that talks about your why. What's your why for doing this?
I knew, Ken, when I was about 12 that I wanted to be a psychologist, and some would say that that's really rare to know that early. And I think what it stems from is coming from a large family where I was one of the youngest. From a very early age, I became pretty adept at uh, reading and observing family relationships, understanding the dynamics, and was blessed with what some would say is empathetic orientation. And so I was fortunate to grow up in a family that I was supported. My career choice was supported, my passion was supported, and I was guided to this field. But I think it really comes from my early childhood experiences and what it was like within my own family dynamic.
Fantastic. You've led and are leading one of the nation's top nonprofit mental health organizations. What is one leadership lesson you've learned from that lived experience?
I think, and you know, it's no secret that organizations are competing for the best talent. And I think that not for profit organizations are challenged by this even more. Over the years, I've learned that talent isn't always acquired, it's got to be nurtured and grown. We really need to invest in our workforce and the teams that we have in intentional ways. And I think the best leaders are those who can build high performing teams by putting the right people together, developing them individually and collectively, and making the whole so much more than the sum of its parts. At Devereux, particularly, we have taken this one step further. We have a talent development program called Ascend, through which we offer full tuition compensation for undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate degrees, a mentorship program that helps people through career acceleration and career path planning. And so for me, that goal of talent development and nurturing talent, it's very exciting for me that the next chief operating officer at Devereux, or a future chief operating officer at Devereux, could be in our Ascend program right now.
So I love that idea, the idea that talent is not just innate, that you develop it. Say a little bit more about that. What would be one specific intervention or thing that you do as part of Devereux to help develop that talent?
I would say one specific thing is meeting people where they are and viewing them as individuals with individual hopes and dreams. So, as soon as an employee comes into Devereux, they have the opportunity to meet with our career coaches and talk about their backgrounds, talk about the very same question you asked me, which is what brings you into this field, what excites you, how did you end up here? And we have those very conversations with our team members, and we talk with them about you may be entering into a direct care position, but what are your hopes and dreams going forward? Where do you see yourself? What's your skill set? What are you really good at? And where would you like to end up? And how can we help chart that path for you? So I think that's one very specific amongst a whole cadre of interventions that we have and tools that we have to help individuals who come to work for us really tap into their own potential. But that's where it all begins.
I want to probably bounce back and forth a little bit on the patient front and on employees. Let's talk a little bit about, patients. You got 7,500 employees, 15 different sites in, I think, 13 states.
That's right.
Huge. It's a big operation, right?
Yes.
What do you do to keep it human, personal, and connected on the patient front?
You're absolutely right. Devereux's reach and impact spans our continuums of care, and especially mental health and autism, intellectual disabilities, education, and foster care. We serve more than 10,000 individuals through our dedicated team members of over 6,000. I would say the cornerstone of our approach is what we call the Devereux Family Standard. And what that means is everything we do, from our treatment interventions to our environments of care, our interactions with our individuals in care and their families, needs to be at a standard that we would want for our own loved ones. If I walk into a Devereux program and that program does not meet my standards for what I would want for my own child, then that means that I have some significant work to do to make it so. And for us, Ken, an interesting point of pride is that we have 1/3 of our governing board are family members of individuals in our care. And we have these trustees leading family advisory boards that give voice to the work that we do, that guides our approach, what we pay attention to, and how we can further enhance care. We are also fortunate to have some of the leading experts in the field and leadership roles at Devereux who set best practice standards and systems of care and ensure that they're followed and adhered to with fidelity. So we also create intentional forums for collaborative problem solving. And none of this would be possible without our colleagues who are in direct care roles who bring this to life every single day. For some individuals in care, our direct care team members are the only family that they have. I would say on a personal note, I did my dissertation on quality of life in individuals with serious mental illness, understanding what was meaningful to them from their perspective. So this is an area that is particularly near and dear to my heart.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. I was going to ask a question about it, but you brought it up very nicely. Let's speak a little bit more, Rhea, about your dissertation. Maybe a little bit more in depth as to what was one or two really big takeaways from your research?
So I looked at quality of life from the perspective of individuals with serious mental illness. It was a qualitative study that did in-depth interviews with them, as well as with the primary caregiver that they identified in their environment, and looked at the cross-section, really in the intersection of what they said and what caregivers said about what was most meaningful in terms of quality of life. And there were two things that came up that was in common in terms of the themes. One was the relationship that they have with those who care for them. That was primary. And the second one was, it might not surprise you, the relationship that they have with the larger community. So their level of involvement in pro-social, meaningful activity. Those were the two major findings. And I think that they're relevant today. I think anecdotally, when we talk to our staff and when we talk to our individuals in care, and we do that at Devereux in terms of looking at satisfaction, we find that those themes emerge strong.
I get such enjoyment out of hearing that particular piece of what drives change. So I was at Purdue for my PhD, and Dr. Doug Sprankle was one of my professors, and he, as a marriage and family therapist, really wanted to kind of prove that that was the best way to attack problems. And they did a meta-analysis on what creates change, and ultimately they came down to, wow, 30+% of the variance could be accounted by the relationship with the therapist. I
Absolutely.
mean, over and over again, we find that same thing.
Yes.
All right. You're known as having tremendous energy to turn things around if, things go a little wonky. And look, I'm in behavioral health too. Of course, programs get a little bit sideways. Things aren't moving in the direction that we want at times. What do you do when there really is a turnaround needed? You're coming into a program and they just need to make some changes. Where do you start?
The first thing I do is assess leadership capacity, Ken. Do we have the right bench? Do we have to augment and support our leaders differently? Do we need to make changes? I don't think programs turn around, sustain, and thrive without the right leadership at the helm. So that's first and foremost. Next, I think it's important to get the right stakeholders around the table and hear their ideas transparently. More than often, I find that the staff in the program, the leadership teams, they know the solutions, at least they know what's broken. And if you can draw that out of them honestly and transparently, then you have, I think, what you need to work with. That, I think, then leads to identifying what the priorities are. And from there, you can map out a turnaround plan. And that's only a third of the work. I think that's when the real work begins. And then after that, it's really about providing the support, consistent monitoring, against those goals, having very clear expectations and accountability. And it's an all hands on deck approach from the executive level to every single member of the team. What role do we each need to play to achieve the collective goal? I think it's also important to be attuned as leaders for what's changed in the environment. Sometimes a turnaround means that you have to make the decision to serve a different client population, change the geographic area in order to be responsive to the community's needs. So I think at the end of the day, great turnaround leaders make it their business to be aware, to be adaptable, and to be action oriented.
Very, very nice, concise way of describing what you need to find. So when you come in and you're wanting to know, do we have the right leadership team? That's the starting place. What are some of the first things that you're looking for that you say that's not going to work, that will not build what we need to build?
Complacency is number one. Complacency is one. The second is a resistance to looking at things a different way. You've heard that saying, it's madness to think that you can continue to do what you're doing and expect a different result. So really siloed thinking, rigid thinking about not looking at options. I think those would be red flags. And the third I would say is a leader who's not willing to roll up their sleeves with their team and charge ahead and motivate, that has kind of given up. Those would be red flags.
The antithesis of complacency is, I think, the concept that Stephen Covey talked about, sharpening the saw, always learning new things. And you just exude that you're one that's learning new things. You're trying to find out what's your go-to in terms of sharpening the saw.
I don't have a single resource that I would identify. There's so many, they're innumerable, especially today. There's so many formal and informal ways of learning. I would say it's a growth mindset, and it's being an avid reader, first and foremost. It's surrounding yourself with information that is diverse, that challenges your way of thinking, not just going to what feels comfortable. So, reading, exposing yourself to opinions and data that is data inputs that challenge your way of thinking. And I think that goes to surrounding yourself with people who challenge your way of thinking. The best advice that I get is often not from people who agree with me, but people who say, wait a minute, have you thought about it this way? And that, I think, is a key component of a growth mindset and what you're talking about in terms of sharpening the saw.
Yeah. Having a growth mindset too, I heard a podcaster not too long ago, it's been said a few times, that you want to be the most interesting person in the room, read 10 books in a year on a variety of subjects. Right. And what that does to expand your mind is amazing. You talk about that, reading. What's a book that you have read in the last year or two that's really been, wow, that brought me great new knowledge?
Radical candor. Have you heard of radical candor?
I have. We use that in our business too. I love it. What do you like about
Radical candor. I think it's challenges traditional ways of interacting with teams and as a leader, and encourages empathy in a direct way. And I think we need more of that in the world. We need, not just in our field, but as leaders and people who are trying to drive communities forward, we need to be more direct and need to do it with a level of empathy and understanding, but not shy away from that. I think it really speaks to a cross-section of societal needs, so outside of just our business in leadership.
We use that one in crucial conversations, and it's been transformative in businesses that I've been in. So Devereux leans into data and outcomes in a pretty big way. What's one metric that you find to be super important in terms of capturing the information you need for Devereux?
That's a great question, Ken. Yes, data and outcomes that demonstrate that individuals are making true progress while they're in our care is critically important. And we always want to ensure that individuals are better for their time with us at Devereux. So we analyze a number of clinical, educational, and quality outcomes, along with qualitative information about how our individuals and families feel about our efforts and our programs. But I would say one metric that has a much more far-reaching impact for organizations and is a leading indicator of quality of care and overall organizational health is measuring the strength of an organization's culture. So you might ask, so how does one measure culture? At Devereux, servant leadership is the bedrock of our culture. It's a proven model that has supported wide spectrums of organizations to help them thrive. And at its heart, servant leadership is about putting people first, about the leadership of the organization being in service of the workforce. including especially those who are working at the front lines. They're the most important. And the reason why it's important is because this fosters mutual commitment. You demonstrate your commitment to the workforce, listen to them, and support them in meaningful ways. This shapes their daily experience, and they in turn then commit to the people that we're there to serve, which is our individuals in care, which is ultimately what we want to do. Ken, we have spent the last 10 years at Devereux investing in terms of effort, in terms of resources, financial as well, in embedding servant leadership into every nook and cranny of the organization in our culture. And for the last 3 years, we've partnered with the State University of New York in Buffalo with a leading servant leadership expert, Dr. Jim Lemoyne, on benchmarking ourselves against other organizations to see how we have progressed. And I would say that is a really important outcome to measure, and we are very encouraged by our results, and we continue to make this a priority.
One of the ways that I see people try and target, understanding of their culture is net promoter scores. Is that anything that Devereux does?
We are in the process of getting to a net promoter score. We've done some research. We've contracted with an organization that actually specializes in doing quality feedback, satisfaction outcomes, and we're on the path there, yes.
To even be considering net promoter scores in a behavioral health arena is quite progressive. It's very impressive. Fortune 500 companies do that. What else is really sort of on the cutting edge, would you say, in Devereux's treatment model?
Everything we do at Devereux is evidence-based. So every single program and service that we operate, we identify what is the best practice treatment model, what's the evidence-based practice for this particular developmental need, for this particular population, and that's what we use. And I think that's something that sounds like it's basic, but it's challenging to do that. It's a lot of investment and a lot of research that backs it up. And it takes years to get to fidelity. And proud to say that we're doing that for every single one of our populations. The other thing that we do is we are constantly looking to innovate. So how does technology support and enhance programs and services? So we're looking at everything from safety technology, where I think we're at the cutting edge of doing that, in terms of how we use video, in terms of how we look at data, and we're constantly researching and working with system partners and other providers to identify the latest and greatest tools and technology that augment the services that we have. And we do all of this being a nonprofit organization. So it takes a constant prioritization of where to put resources and keep our programs strong, thriving, and also have an eye towards what's cutting edge in the field and make sure that we're striving for that.
In 2002, I finished my PhD, went to work as a therapist, and moved into administration, like you have, fairly quickly, and stumbled on Devereux as a referral partner, and toured then the first time a Devereux site in Texas in 2005. And it was terribly impressive as a nonprofit organization to have the level, as you're talking, of culture. People were bought into what you were doing. It was very clear. And I've toured also in Denver, and it's a fine organization.
That's so great to hear, Ken, and we hear that all the time. It is the most gratifying thing to hear. I've heard people who come to interview with us for jobs. We have heard from family members. You walk into a Devereux program and you just have a feeling. And they can't put it into words, but they say you walk into the door and you feel different. You just know that everybody you're surrounded by is working towards the same mission, which is to support our individuals the best that they can. And people are happy. They look happy. And those are the intangibles, right? And we talked about servant leadership and how we're trying to measure that in a scientific way. But there's so much value in these anecdotal stories when people say every single program that you walk into, you know this is a special place.
Yeah, I've been a fan of Devereux, and I've launched a few programs and had some businesses go successful, and then was doing consulting for a while and really enjoying that. But there came an opportunity to apply as executive director for Devereux in Denver. And I actually applied because I was so impressed with what you were doing. Ultimately, I didn't get the job.
Oh.
I was one of a couple of people vying for it, but it was a really great process to go through just to get to know at that level the ability to pivot, the ability that you value culture. It was really an enjoyable experience, just so that you're aware.
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah. All right. The name of our podcast is The Voice of Hope. And really it's easy. We're in a time in this world, and you can say this almost any time in history, but there's plenty you can be pessimistic about. There's lots going on. What do you find that gives you hope, Rhea, in this business, in this venture of life?
It comes down to the individual stories. Even one story of a parent or an individual care that says, I had lost hope. I had come to the end of the road. And then I found Devereux, or Devereux found me. And my child has been in Devereux's care. My child wasn't speaking. My child had no independent skills. I couldn't manage my child at home. I'd given up all hope. My family was torn apart by what we were dealing with. And then we found Devereux. And I go to some graduations at some of our centers and talk with our parents. And the number of families that come up and say, we had reached the end of the road, and then we found you. And now, 2 years later, my kid's on the stage giving a speech. And a few years ago, he couldn't even take care of his own independent daily activities of daily living. I'm getting a little choked up talking about it. But that's what gives me hope. And there's innumerable stories that we come across every single day in this work that we do. That's what gives me hope, that we can make a difference.
Rhea, it's clear that you are part and parcel of the culture of Devereux, and that you would spend some time with us. I'm just super grateful. Thank you for opening up your heart and opening up what's going on in the business at Devereux. Appreciate spending some time with you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for what you do.
Thanks for joining us on The Voice of Hope. If you were inspired, share the light. And remember, hope's not just a feeling, it's a force. We'll see you next time.